We're in Isaiah chapter 14, and we were talking about how the Lord had divided the nations. And I read the scriptures where he said that he had said these are the families of the sons of Noah. You have it on page 120. These are the families of the sons of Noah after their generations in their nations. By these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. The Lord divided the nations. It's like he drew a line. This bit of the property is yours. This piece of the property is yours. And he put a name on it, and that was to be their land. They were not to conquer their neighbor's land. They were not to become huge empires exalting man. They were to stay in the land that God had divided unto them. That's what they were supposed to do. And the Bible lists those nations and the people who were to settle those nations. And it also says when the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance. When he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. That's very important as well. Then Acts 17:26 said, and he hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth. And he hath determined the times before appointed, and the bounds of their habitation. So we see when Satan lied to man over and over and over again. We're going to look at some of those lies tonight. But when God gave them this amount, they wanted more. And they wanted more. And they wanted more. That was the satanic influence, yes, but it was also showed the greedy heart of man and how it's never enough. They want to be exalted. They want to be ruler. So we find, as we studied before, that the Tower of Babel is Satan's throne. The Tower of Babel is where his seat is. The Tower of Babel is the Gentile world powers that would be set up. Not just Babylon, but all the Gentile world powers. And at the end of the book of Revelation, when we have the last Gentile world power, it's called Mystery Babylon, because it's a consummation of all those nations joined together in such a way that he said it's a beast unlike any other beast. It can't even be called a leopard or lion or anything like that, because it's a beast unlike any other kind of beast. And that's what we're watching coming together today. And it's in plain sight. And as I put this on the board last week, there's nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact hidden in plain sight. And it's right before our eyes. We're watching the new world order come together. We're watching the old world order falling apart, being divided in every way imaginable. Our nation has never been so divided. But it is in the plan of Satan and in the plan of man to set up a new world order. But what people don't realize is to set up a new world order, they have to destroy the old one. They have to take it apart. They have to change everything. And that's what we're watching come to pass. And that is Satan's system. It is anti-God. It is anti-Christ. It's anti the Word of God. It is man wanting to be exalted himself rather than exalting God. And that's what was in Nimrod's heart. And it was in the lies. I listed down here some of the lies that was told. The lie to Eve. What was the lie to Eve? That you're going to be as gods. You'll be as gods. And that's humanism. The lie to Cain. Do it your own way. I mean, think about it. If you do it, just do it your own way. And then the lie to Nimrod. Let us build us a city. Let us build us a tower. Let us build a tower unto gods. Let us make our own religion. Let us make our own government. So you see, these lies come from Satan, but they're in the heart of man. If it wasn't in the heart of man, because Satan can't make you do anything. Satan cannot make anybody do anything. But he puts it out there and he tempts them. So he wanted man to be exalted rather than God. Then the lie to Israel. When Israel said, no, we don't want God as our king anymore. We want a king like all the other nations. We want to be just like the other nations. And even though the prophet told them, this is what God said. God said they'll take your people, they'll take your children, they'll take your money, they'll take your land, they'll take your crops. And they said, we still want to be just like all the other nations, and we want a king. And they were rejecting theocracy. And they were rejecting it for what Nimrod had set up, Satanocracy. That's what it is. That's what it is. So we saw that last week in our lesson. We saw how from Isaiah chapter 13 through chapter 27, it's over and over again how he's going to judge this nation and how he's going to save Israel. How he's going to judge this nation and how he's going to save Israel. But here's one thing we need to remember, that God chose these nations to use as a rod to chasten Israel. So whenever he speaks about the rod here in the book of Isaiah, he's speaking of the instrument that he chose to chasten Israel. And the instrument that he chose to chasten Israel was Babylon, Media-Persia, Greece, Rome, and the New World Order, Assyria, Egypt. I mean, all of these nations, God used them as a rod to chasten Israel and bring Israel back where Israel's supposed to be. And he said it would be severe chastisement. But he always said there'll be a remnant. And all the covenant promises that I have made with you will come true. But you will have to repent as a nation. And they've got a lot of repenting to do all the way back to where they said, no, we want our own king. We want our own way. In fact, they have to go all the way back to the law where they said, we'll take the law. I mean, they actually wanted law to do it their own way through works rather than the grace of God. It's hard for us to understand that, but that's the heart of man. So God tells us here in Isaiah chapter 14, and I think it's through, let's see what verse that is. We're going to read that verse 2 or 3 times probably. On page 125. Yes, the bottom of the page. Because this is really the key verses here. Isaiah 14:24 tells us, the Lord of hosts hath sworn, saying, surely as I have thought, so shall it come to pass. And as I have purposed, so shall it stand. All right? I love that. I love that verse. But remember now, in chapter 13, he starts telling us how he's going to destroy these nations who come against Israel. All right? But then he uses them to chasten Israel, and then he destroys them for coming against Israel. And why can he do that? Because he's God. That's why. He said, I have purposed it, and so shall it stand. And then Isaiah 14:26, and this is what I want you to really see here. Because so many times, and it's been taught for so many years, that when he speaks of Babylon, that he's just speaking of one piece of territory. But in all reality, sometimes he's speaking about Babylon as the system of religion, as that political system, and as the total Babylonian empire. That's why you have to not take verses out of context and read it very carefully, the whole chapter. Because sometimes they'll take one verse out of that chapter and they'll say, oh, well, he's just talking about Babylon, which was a city in Iraq. No. Sometimes he's talking about all the nations that he calls Mystery Babylon, that last Gentile world power. The Mystery Babylon, which is political, commercial, and spiritual. So we need to understand that, because look at this verse. In 14:26 it says this. This is the purpose that is purposed upon what? The whole earth. Now this chapter is talking about Babylon being destroyed. This chapter talks about Assyria being destroyed. But then he says it's upon the whole earth. Because we forget sometimes that the Babylonian Empire was huge. It wasn't just one country. It was huge, where they had swallowed up many different areas. The Assyrian Empire was huge. The Grecian Empire was huge. It took in a bigger. And then the Roman Empire was massive. It's kind of, you can kind of picture it like this. Remember the USSR? Yeah. Remember how huge it was? And then it's split into all these little countries that Putin is going to try and swallow back up. But if you remember that, see, they were taken. I mean, God had given them a border, and you're not supposed to step over that border. But man was so greedy and wanted so much power and so much wealth. And see, that's Satan. That's that Satan spirit. And the Bible even calls it a Babylonian spirit, where he just wanted it all. But what is that spirit? That's Satan's spirit. Because remember when we studied the book of Daniel, how every leader in the world has a demon appointed unto him? And those demons are called princes. And they're assigned by Satan to corrupt not only that leader, but the nation that leader is the head of. And we see that here, but then in Isaiah 14, he really nails it. I don't like to say God nailed anything. God really nails it by showing us not only the power, then he shows us where it comes from by the fall of Lucifer. Remember we talked about that last week. So let's go over these notes. We find here on page 122. So I want you to realize that the Gentile world powers is Satan's throne. This new world order that's being set up is Satan's throne. All right? So Satan's throne, it began at the Tower of Babel. It's the Gentile world powers. The Babylonian, the Medo-Persia, the Grecian, the Rome, all the Gentile world powers, but it began with the Tower of Babel. But the times of Gentiles didn't begin until the Babylonian Empire chastened Israel. Okay, that's when the times of the Gentiles actually began. In Revelation 13:1, it said, I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast. This is where people get confused. I remember as a kid, I thought it was an actual beast coming up out of the water. You know? But the beast is a system. And he calls it a beast because the characteristics of that system, we talked about that last week. The characteristics of Medo-Persia was like a big old bear that was stronger on one side than the other. That's why the bear leans, and it has the 3 ribs in its mouth. Because those 3 ribs represent Babylon, who they had just conquered, and then Media, and then Persia. So he said it's a beast, like a big old bear. But this beast that comes up out of the sea, this last Gentile world power, is unlike any beast there has ever been. You can't even call it by a name. Because it is the consummation of all the Gentile world powers. Boy, if we could ever get a hold of that, I mean, it could help us to understand the United Nations. It can help us to go back and understand the League of Nations. It can help us to go back and see all these different things that had come together to unite like the religions of the world. Why? Because to have a new world order, there has to be a world religion and a world government. And what will bring that about is causing such chaos and such perplexity among the nations that people will cry out, we need help here. How many of you see that? That we don't know what to do. Do we take the soldiers out? Do we send them back in? Do we hold this ground? Do we give it to Russia? I mean, they don't know what to do. Because it's perplexity. They have messed it up so badly now that they can't find an answer. And God said it would be like that. That no matter which way it turned, it would be perplexing. And he said, they have to do that to bring about a new world order, because they say this one is such a mess. If we all just got together and become one, we wouldn't be fighting each other. If we just come under one government, one religion, because religion is what's making us all fight. And see, this is a lie of Satan, and exactly what Nimrod did. Nebuchadnezzar, I mean, you can follow him all the way through your Bible, to bring that one world together with one man the head of it. What is that? That is Satan counterfeiting what Christ would do when he comes to set up his kingdom. Because there will be a one world order. And Jesus Christ will be King of kings and Lord of lords, one. And that's what Satan wants. And so he started it at the Tower of Babel, and that's why we say that's where his throne is. The Babylonian Brotherhood is the throne of Satan. All right? And then it joined with Rome, as we've studied that before. But let's go on. It says, I stood upon the sandy sea, saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. It's the last Gentile world power that you're seeing come up. And the one that comes out of the sea, that's a political power. That's a political power. But we see them all 3 mentioned here in Revelation chapter 18. So we're going to read these before we go back into Isaiah 14. The last Gentile world power, or Mystery Babylon. Mystery Babylon. It's Babylon, but just in a different form. Okay? And Babylon means what? City of God. And Babel means what? Confusion. Chaos. So it's not just Babylon, but it's another form of Babylon. That's why it's called Mystery Babylon. You can connect the dots all the way. Connect it all the way. Revelation 18 says in verse 3, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Now when it speaks of her, it's speaking of that false religion. Because remember, God presents religious, I hate to call them systems, but religious groups in the Bible as women. Israel, the spiritual Israel, is the wife of Jehovah. The church is the bride of Christ. False religion is the great whore of what? Babylon. The mother of harlots. The queen of heaven. The mother of God. I mean, these are the titles. And it came from the Tower of Babel. And he mentions them here in Revelation chapter 18. So it shows us that that Babylonian religion, in a new form, will be ruling the world in that last 7 years of the tribulation. Okay? So we see it coming together right now. The churches are splitting all over. They are. And in the Protestant churches are saying, well, let's drop the doctrines that divide us and join together as one. The Catholic Church is splitting all to pieces. And we saw another story about that just this past week. I was just reading and sharing it with SJ here. And what was it? The Pope, they called a synod, which is a group, a family meeting. I think that's a funny word, isn't it? Synod. We call them a synod. But anyway, they called this meeting. And the Pope had told them that he wanted to kind of lighten up. Now, I'm not putting it in his words. But he said he's going to lighten up on marriages and divorces and different things to the family. And so a lot of the Catholics were very upset about that. There's 270 of them that's elected who were a little bit upset about him wanting to kind of lighten up on the church doctrines. And so rather than go through the ones who had been elected, he assigned. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
He went above the heads of the ones who were elected, so it wouldn't be their vote, and he assigned a group to agree with him on this. Well, now, the different Catholic leaders in this, even in this country, that Dolan, you see him on the news all the time, they have written a letter to him because they're very upset that this has been done. And his answer to them was, I'm the Pope.
The vicar of Christ.
I'm the Pope.
Yeah.
So you wonder, okay, who's going to challenge that?
Same spirit.
Do you see the same thing that's happening in the political realm is happening in the religious realm, and the same one behind it is Satan. So it's in plain sight. And it's falling right in line, using all the strategies of Satan to bring about that last Gentile world power. So when it's speaking about her, it's speaking about that last religious system, that one that was spawned at the Tower of Babel, the Babylonian Brotherhood. It says, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And when it speaks here of fornication, it's speaking of a spiritual fornication, going against God. Not only as the wife of Jehovah, but as the bride of Christ, because later on in here, he calls his people to come out of her. And they need to be coming out of her right now. Right? He said, of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants. So we see it's political, spiritual, and commercial. Political, the nations, and her, that's the spiritual. And then the merchants, that's commercial. So you have all three Babylons spoken here, and it's called Mystery Babylon. One system with two heads to begin. The false prophet and the Antichrist. But in the middle of the 7-year tribulation, the false prophet demands that everyone worship the Antichrist and points all worship to him. That's exactly what Semiramis did. She allowed them to have all these different gods, but they had to worship Nimrod as the father of all the gods. He was the chief god. Understand? So when her son Tammuz was born, she said that Tammuz was the incarnation of God the Father come in the Son, and so Tammuz was God the Son. So there is your unholy trinity. Can you see how it's being set up even today? Even today. Let's go on. He said, the merchants of the earth will wax rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people. Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins. Man stands before God without excuse. Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, all of them, they stand before God without excuse. Right? That you receive not of her plagues for her sins. I mean, you can see the anger of God here in false religion. And why would his anger be so full of wrath here? Why? Because these people are going to hell. That's why they're going to hell. He said, for her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Well, I guess so. It's been how many years? From the Tower of Babel, that's about 3,000 years before Christ. It's 2,000, there's 5,000 years. I'd say he's, probably getting on his nerves. He's about to pick up the book and go in the room and close the door. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her, even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double, according to her works, in the cup which she hath filled, fill to her double. I mean, she's going to get double the punishment. People always ask, where do you get the idea that there's going to be degrees of punishment? It's all the way through the Bible, and here we have that she gets double. The false religion leaders, they're going to get double. And this isn't just Catholic, by the way. A lot of people says, oh, that's Catholic. Well, Catholic will be the head of it, because it is the only religion that's recognized by the whole world as being the religion. They have their own capital, they have their own ambassador, everything. And whenever the news talks about the church, who's it talking about? But this will be a Catholic church divided, and will have a whole lot of the Protestants who have joined her. And what happened this past year, remember? I think I did it in Sunday school. About
Ken Copeland.
Yes, Ken Copeland and Joel Osteen. All the leaders of some of the major denominations in this country were invited to the Vatican. And they were, the Pope went to their conference through a video and asked them all to come back. And let's all join together. Remember Copeland? I think we saw that. And Copeland was praying for the Pope. And Joel Osteen went over there, and they were all praying for the Pope and raising their hands and, wanting to join together and drop things that divided them and become one. So it's not just Catholic. And then what did he do? He invited the Jews and the Muslims. And he played all that Muslim music, and he read from the Quran, standing there on the podium at the Vatican. What is he doing? Well, one thing he did was he turned his back on Israel and he sided with the Palestinians. But if you look behind what he's doing, he's wanting to bring them all back in. You're seeing commercials on TV now. I've noticed a change in the commercials in just the last month. The shows are so boring, the commercials. But you see, a lot of the commercials now have same-sex couples. A whole lot of them. They have same-sex couples in it. But there's commercials coming on all the time about coming back to the Catholic Church. Come home. Come home.
Yep.
Come home. So it's not just the Catholic Church, it's the unfaithful, disobedient Protestant churches as well. Because some of the Catholic people are going to leave. But then some of the Protestant people are going to join. And they're going to have a new name. And it won't be the great whore of Babylon, but this is what God calls it. And he said they will have double judgment. Now you think about the things that will have to change for the Protestant churches and the Catholic churches to come together. First of all, we'll have to be out of here because we're people who cause problems. Okay, that's right. We'll have to be out of here. So a lot of things will have to change. They'll have to change some of the doctrines like marriage, the annulment, and the right for the Catholic people who have been married before to have their marriage annulled where they can receive communion and forgiveness for all those who have had abortions. And I mean, things have to change, and this Pope is changing them really quick. And there's a whole lot of different things about this Pope that people aren't even talking about. He's the first Jesuit. And all you need to do is check and see what the Jesuit priests were. They were the ones who were hired by the Catholic Church of old to do all the warring, to destroy the King James Bible. Yes, just check it. It's in history, but it's hidden in plain sight.
Yes.
Just like when I told you about the Statue of Liberty. That's hidden in plain sight. But you have to do some research to find that. But it's in the encyclopedias. And that crown upon her head, I mean, that's the sun goddess. Those points, that's the sun goddess. She was made to be the statue of Ishtar, Isis, and they rejected it. And so they called her Libator, the liberator, and they changed it just a little bit and gave it to America.
Yeah.
And we accepted it. But if you check back to who the sculptor was, when he made it, who he originally made it for, and then how they dressed it up and gave it to America, and there in the harbor of New York City, there close to the UN is what? A statue of Isis, Ishtar, Apollo, all of them to the sun god. And who was the one who was worshipped as the sun god? Nimrod. And who did the Egyptians worship? The sun god. Who did the Babylonians worship? The sun god. Who did the Romans worship? The sun god. Listen, even Abraham's daddy worshiped the sun god. You see it's hidden in plain sight? And they just changed the names, but you have to really peel that onion back, okay? Where was it before that? Where was it before that? But no, people will read the little piece on there saying what it is and what they're saying it is, and then it'll give a little picture of the sculptor and so on, but then you look about the sculptor. And then you just keep following the clues till you find out the origin. It takes time, but it's worth it. And we might do that before this series is over. But you need to realize it's in plain sight. It's right in front of us. Rockefeller said, he has set out, he said, I am guilty of it. I have set out to create a new world order. That's why the UN. That's why that ground. I wrote down here something that, let me read to you what George Bush said. He said, out of these, and this is the old man Bush. I guess they're both old men now. But old man Bush. Number 41, number 42. We'll go back to number 41. He said, out of these troubled times, our objective, this is what kills me, is they say it right out.
Yeah.
And everybody applaud. They don't stop and think what the man is saying. Okay? He said, our objective is a new world order. He said, and it can emerge. Today, the new world order is struggling to be born. A world quite different from the one that we have now. Listen. It's exactly what's happening. And they said that all they needed was one young man that they could groom to be president and to bring it all about. But before we, while we're talking about that, let's remember this. God puts people in office.
That's right.
He allows them in there to bring about His purpose. Remember the verses we just read? He allowed them to be in office to bring about His purpose. And His purpose says, this is the purpose that is purposed upon the whole earth. And this is the hand that is stretched out upon all nations. That's what He says in Isaiah 14. He wants us to see it's not just a territory of Babylon. It's not just a territory of Media-Persia. It's not just a territory of Greece. It's not just a territory of Rome. It's the territory of all the nations who want to come together under one head. And as soon as they can figure out which one head to rule.
Yeah.
But the Bible gives us all these signs. And if you're watching in the Middle East, and you're watching Gog and Magog, you're watching Russia step in there and take his position and join together with Iran and join together with Iraq. I mean, you're watching it fall in place. You can read it in Ezekiel chapter 38 that we might read here in a few minutes. He said, I told my people, you better come out of there because I'm about to give her double punishment. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. In other words, as much as she's enjoyed life, I want you to torture her that much. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen. I sit a queen. You can't tell me what to do. I am no widow, and I shall see no sorrow. Deceived herself. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. And guess what? Before God gets a hold of her, He allows the one world government, those 10 nations, to destroy her. Because the Antichrist says, look, I want to be head honcho here. And I want to rule not over just the government, I want to rule over the church too. So all of those who won't agree, burn them. And that's what happens. And that's what happens. The kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And when we talk about the city here, a lot of people think it's Babylon in Iraq. A lot of people think it's Rome in Europe. And some people even think it's New York in the United States. I think the Bible's pretty clear that it's on 7 hills and it's Rome. Because it does say it's on 7 hills. And even Rome says it's them. Yeah. Standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas. And the merchants, and here we get into the commercial part. So we have the political, we have the spiritual, and now we have the commercial part. So it's 3 parts of this great beast. The merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet. Remember the woman riding the beast and how beautiful she is in all her robes and holding her cup, golden cup with wine. Do you realize those symbols are used by the European common market nations? Right in front of all their buildings is the woman riding the beast. You can get pictures of it on the internet. Greg went over there and saw it. Purple and silk and scarlet. Why? Because it's hidden in plain view. And all the fine fine wood, and all manner vessels of ivory, and all manner vessels of most precious wood, and brass, and iron, and marble, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil. I mean, all of this is commercial, the flour, the wheat, the beasts, the sheep, the horses, the chariots, the slaves, and the souls of men. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee. I mean, religion is a money-making part of this mystery Babylon. They make lots of money with religion. Why do you think the Pope invited all the head leaders of the major denominations, like the ones who have 35,000 and the ones who have 40,000 and all those different, why them? Why them? Well, the bishop said exactly why. He said because that's where the money is. Remember the bishop who brought it all together? And then he was killed on a motorcycle? Yeah. But one of the things that he said in front of the camera, I watched him, I heard him say it. He said, I told the Pope he needs to get with these guys because they're the ones who knows how to make money. They have all their own private jets. I mean, he said that in plain sight. For all to hear. Of course, next year he was killed in a motorcycle accident. But see, and he told him you need to get a hold of the Hollywood people. And that's exactly what the Pope did. He called in the Hollywood people. And he told them, he said, we want you to present the church as something wonderful instead of a bunch of fools. And we'll work with you. He called in people like Oprah Winfrey. I mean, why do you think the Pope is calling all these people in? There is a reason for that. It's bringing it all together. So the commercial part, all that wealth, the merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, alas, that great city was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. Sounds like those huge cathedrals. Yeah. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. I was in some of those cathedrals when I was over in the Middle East, and let me tell you, you step inside there, and it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. I mean, just a little much. You know, gold and silver and all the stuff. Just a little much. But then you step outside, and the people are living in huts and wood boxes and begging on the streets. Think of that. Think of that. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And that's what's going to happen. Every shipmaster and all the company in ships and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood afar off. And they cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. It doesn't mean that it's going to actually take 60 minutes. What it means here is it's all going to happen at one time. Just when they think everything is going well, God's going to pull the rug out from under them. And they're going to be wondering, what happened? What happened? Because see, the heart of these tyrants, when you think about these tyrants, let's bring it up to today. Like Osama bin Laden and Hussein. I mean, the way that Hussein lived, the wealth that he had, and he was rebuilding Babylon, and every fifth stone he was putting his own name because he said he was the reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, you think the pompousness of these people, these tyrants. But you know why I love Isaiah 14? It says, hell's waiting for you. Come on down. That's what it says. Not only to them, to the tyrants and the emperors and the kings and the presidents and the popes and all those people who want to rule the whole thing. He says, hell's waiting for you. They're down there waiting for you. And he says the same thing to Satan. Because the day, he says, the day will come when Satan, when his last rebellion, fire will come down from heaven and just devour him. right in front of all these foolish people who are following him. All these foolish leaders will see him just devour the ashes from inside, and he'll drop down into hell where they're waiting for him. Can you imagine the anger of the people who've been in hell all these years? And then there's Satan. And we think of hell, you might think they're tied up in there. No. The Bible speaks about them chewing and gnawing and biting each other. And that the fire it just torments them day and night and day and night. And guess what? They know each other there. Can you imagine Hitler? When he fell into hell and there he had to face all those leaders that he had led. And the hatred that must be in their heart for him. When I hear someone say, hey, all my friends are going to be in hell.
Yeah.
We're going to party. That poem, Paradise Lost. What was his name? Milton?
Yeah.
And he presented hell like a place where Satan will rule and sit on a throne. Satan will not sit on no throne, not in hell. He'll be in the deepest parts of hell, and they'll all be after him there. They'll all be after him. And Isaiah 14 paints that picture, and so does Ezekiel chapter 28, when it speaks about the end of Satan. You think Satan can't read?
Yep.
He knows, that's right. He knows what's ahead of him.
Demons.
He knows it. Rejoice over her. Rejoice over her, thou heaven. There'll be rejoicing in heaven. That's awesome, by the way. And ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged her, has avenged you on her. Think of all those prophets and all those Christians, even the Christians today, who are being burned alive over there. Even the children who are being raped to death by those Islamic people and making their parents stand there and watch it. You're going to tell me they're people like any other people? These are Satan people.
Yeah. Possessed.
Because it takes somebody from Satan to do things like that. And they're doing it in the name of religion. Wow. Wow. God is going to revenge. That's where he says, vengeance is mine. And when the Lord comes back, and we come back with him, he's not just coming as a kinsman redeemer. He's coming as a blood avenger. And the first bloodbath will be Armageddon.
Right.
Remember in heaven, under the fifth seal, and the martyrs are crying out to him for vengeance. And he said, just wait. Wait till that last martyr is slain. When the last one of my martyrs is slain, we're going to go down there. And I'm going to avenge you. And the vengeance don't stop there. Then they go to hell, where people are waiting for them down there. And you don't want anybody to go to hell. But you really just don't want anybody to go to hell. A lot of people think hell, you just go there, you burn up, and it's over. No.
Yeah.
As long as people are alive in eternity, they'll be alive in hell. Eternity is in both places. Both places. And they are eternally dying. Never coming to the end of it, but eternally dying in hell tonight. You know what? That should be preached in every church Sunday morning.
Yep.
It really should.
You know it.
I mean, it might keep a few dollars from going in the offering, but it might really shake up enough people to realize this is real, this is really happening, and we are that generation.
Yep.
We are that generation to see this come to pass. Wow. I didn't think so, Donna. I've been teaching this for 42 years, but I thought I'd be out of here. I wouldn't get to see this come together, but you know what?
He's not finished with you yet.
Yeah, it's exciting to see it fall in place. It is. And it just kind of, it fills me with joy, and at the same time, sometimes anger, and sometimes great sorrow, because people don't see it as being real. Oh, they might talk about it, but really they don't want to. It's real, it's right in front of us. A mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, "Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all." When you think about that literal city built on 7 hills, Rome, and people go over there on romantic vacations, they should reach down there at the Colosseum and pick up the sand
Yes.
and realize, you know what's in that sand?
Blood.
The blood of prophets, the blood of Christians, the blood of the forefathers of Christianity,
Yeah.
where they've been torn apart by the beast, the crushed up bones. Very romantic, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you say, well, Mama, that's not really nice. Well, reality sucks. And here it is. So if you're planning a trip to Rome, I just blew it for you. All right. The voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all. I mean, you think about all the entertainment. People are entertained out of their mind. That's why you hear the last few generations, "I'm so bored." And now they have something in their hand, and I mean, they can't even lay it down to eat. They're totally addicted to these things, constantly. Entertained out of their brain. He said that entertainment field, you look at that, what is his name, that guy who was at that brothel, and he was married to one of the Kardashians.
Oh.
I can't think of his name right now because I don't follow any of that, but you know how sad that is? Here is a man who had every kind of wealth you can imagine, and here he is at a whorehouse, taking drugs and alcohol, and now they don't expect him to even live. He had several massive strokes. They carried him out on a stretcher. He's entertained out of his mind. He said, "The voices of the harpers and the musicians and the pipers and the trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. No craftsman, or whatsoever craft he be, shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of the millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. And the light of the candle shall shine no more." I mean, God's talking total destruction here. "And the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were great men of the earth, for by their sorceries." Now you take that word. You know what it is? Drugs. Drugs. And what was the fall of this great sportsman yesterday?
Right.
Drugs.
Yeah.
He'd been fighting the monster of drugs. He said, "For by their sorceries," you trace that word back, pharmaceutical, it comes to drugs, "were all nations deceived." No matter what you go in and complain about, they got a pill. They got a pill. "And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that was slain upon the earth." There's your handful of dust out of the Colosseum. "And after these things I heard a great voice of much people in heaven saying, Alleluia, salvation and glory and honor and power unto the Lord our God." In heaven they'll be shouting. "For true and righteous are his judgments, for he hath judged the great whore, false religion, which did corrupt the earth with her fornication, and hath avenged the blood of his servants at her hands." You look at these pictures that they're using in Europe, and I have extensive amount of these. I just put a few here, but you've seen them before. These are the symbols that they're using to bring together the New World Order. They're using the Tower of Babylon, many tongues, with its stars around it. They're using this. That's how they're building their buildings. These government buildings are being built like the Tower of Babel, unfinished. And they used the Tower of Babel on their money. They used the woman riding the beast on their money. They used the woman riding the beast in front of their buildings. And then their coins, they'll have a coin. On one side of the coin will be a pope, and on the other side of the coin will be, look at her head. What is on the head of Semiramis here?
Her son.
Right. The sun. Do you see how it goes out? The sun, the crown, shaped like the sun that goes out in the light. And she's sitting where? On the throne, holding the thing of Tammuz, the staff of Tammuz, and in her hand is that cup that is full of all her filth. But she's pictured here as the Mother Church, as the Queen of Heaven on the back of this coin. And these are right in plain sight. I mean, you can ask, why the Tower of Babel? Because it's many tongues coming together. That's why.
Aren't those pentagrams that are flying over? That's like the satanic.
Yes.
The stars are
yes, the
upside
stars
down.
are shaped in pentagrams like Satan. You know, he's not hiding this,
Whoa.
people. I mean, it's in plain sight. You look at the stars. I mean, we've taught this before, so we're not going to go into detail tonight, but you look at these symbols, and look it up on your computer, the symbols of the European Common Market nations. And then you study that Statue of Liberty and find out that one of the names was Diana. And then you come back to Ephesus, where Paul is talking about Diana. And Diana was just another name for Ishtar and Isis and Semiramis. They're all come from the Tower of Babylon, and they had like 3,000 different gods. And the thing is when he changed the languages, they changed the names of the god in that language. But they're the same gods. They're the unholy trinity. Nimrod, anti-God the Father. Semiramis, anti-God the Holy Spirit. Tammuz, anti-God the Son. Nothing new under the sun, is there? And it's falling right in place, and they're saying the time of Osiris is coming. And who is that? That's God. The Son, S-U-N. Jeremiah 51:7 says, Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand. There you see her sitting on the throne holding that golden cup. That made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. You see her sitting up here. I painted her from one of those things that they had dug up over there. And she sits on that seat, and she holds this huge golden cup. Semiramis on her throne. Revelation 14:10 says, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. You think her cup is full? God's cup is full. It said, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels, in the presence of the Lamb. Tormented. Anybody who receives that mark of the beast will be tormented day and night forever and ever and ever and ever. Because see, receiving that mark of beast happens in the middle of the 7-year tribulation. And it's a willing choice. You either receive it or you die, but it's still a choice. Look in Isaiah 14 on your next page. So what I just showed you gives you a glimpse of the kingdom. We're not just talking about little Babylon in the city of Iraq. We're talking about Babylon. All the nations that was under the Babylonian Empire. When people think of Babylon, they just think that. No, Babylon was all those nations. Assyria was all those nations. I love what he says about Assyria in here, when he speaks to the other nations. And then Greece. Assyria actually was part of Russia. Russia was part of the Assyrian Empire. All you have to do is get those maps. The map that says the ancient Assyrian Empire, and then get an atlas and put it beside it and see what nations it covered at that time. God says all the nations. all the nations. This is the judgment. See, Isaiah saw the near judgment of Babylon, when Medo-Persia would be sent in by God. But Isaiah saw even further than that. He saw the destruction of all of Babylon at the end of time. So many of the prophets saw that. They would see something near, and then further on, kind of makes you think of those mountain peaks. They not only see the first peak, but then they see the next one, and the next one, and the next one, but not the valleys in between. So it gives us a glimpse of the kingdom in beginning, the end, and the power behind the Gentile world powers. So when you study the Tower of Babel, that's not a little children's story. That's the beginning of Satan's system. Just another lie that Satan had brought out. So the world power, Satan himself as the last Nimrod. He's going to be the last Nimrod. When he is cast out of the heavens in the middle of the 7-year tribulation, he goes into that body. That man has received a wound as if he's dead. He goes into that body. When he stands up, he's the son of perdition. He is Satan in the flesh. Think of that. So the millennial kingdom will be set up. Israel will be restored. I mean, these are the good news, good news, good news. What God has promised is going to come to pass, and we already win. And the good news is that we're going to be taken out of here before all of these things take place. But as we see them fall into place, how soon must his coming be? Isaiah 14:1 says this, "For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob," that's Israel, "and will yet choose Israel." He hasn't forsaken Israel. He maybe for just a little small moment. But look what it says. "And he set them in their own land, and the strangers shall be joined with them." Do you know who the strangers are? That's us. This is a mention of us here.
The saved?
Yes. We're going to be part of that kingdom. We're those strangers. We're not Israel. We're the strangers that's joined into that kingdom with him. The strangers shall be joined with them. When did that happen? With Christ, when he broke down that wall and he made it two of one. He made two into one. "And they shall cleave to the house of Jacob." Oh, why? Because Israel will be the head of all nations. That's God's divine order. Israel will be the head of all nations. So here we see a glimpse of those Gentiles or strangers who are attached to Israel. How are we attached? We were grafted in. That's how. That's how. Look what he says in verse 2. "And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids." Now that's not us, that's the Gentiles who will be living upon the earth. And what he's saying here, and we'll get to it here in a minute, is, you know all those nations, Israel, that you had to serve? Guess what? We're going to flip this. And in the kingdom, they're going to serve you. That's what he's saying. He says that in Hebrew. That's what he's saying. He said, "And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids, and they shall take them captives, whose captives they were." Israel's going to rule. Jesus is going to rule. The 12 tribes, 12 apostles are going to rule over Israel, but Jesus is going to rule with a rod of iron. And the Gentile nations, those that are saved and go into the kingdom, they're going to have to live under that rule. Look what it says. "Whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors." Now they're not going to be evil and mean to them as they were to them, because this is the kingdom. But here's the thing. Israel will be the head of all nations then. It says the nations that once ruled over Israel and kept them in bondage are now under Israel, because Israel's the head of all nations. That's the way the kingdom's going to be set up. Be the capital of the world. God's divine orders we find in Isaiah chapter 11. We find in Zechariah 14 and Deuteronomy chapter 30. He said in verse 3, "And it shall come to pass in the day that the Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow and from thy fear." You know, after he talks about all this judgment and everything, he says, "Oh, but there's coming a day a day of rest. The Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow and from thy fear and from the hard bondage wherein thou wast made to serve. He said, keep in mind, there's coming a time when you're going to repent as a nation. You're going to be restored. There's going to be retribution. You're going to rest and you're going to rejoice in the kingdom. See, the kingdom is coming. But see, people have equated this with heaven. This is not heaven. This is the kingdom on earth that they were promised. Because in heaven we don't have one nation ruling over all the other nations.
Right.
Understand that? But people say, oh no, they're talking about heaven. No, in heaven, Israel won't rule in heaven.
Right.
And it says, keep in mind, though the literal bondage of Israel was great, the bondage of her sin was even greater. He wants them to remember that. He wants them to remember that. It shall come to pass in the day that the Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow, and from thy fear, and from the hard bondage wherein thou wast made to serve. He's not just talking about the literal bondage. He's talking about the bondage of sin. You went into it. You made your choice. You wanted to worship those idols. You wanted those kings. So you lived in bondage, but now you have repented as a nation. He says that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how hath the oppressor ceased? The golden city ceased. It's a proverb. It's like a lamentation. It's a song. Look here in the box. It says, they will sing out, how can this be? The oppressor no longer exists. No more Babylon. No more city of God. They're singing it out. And it says, how can this be? Then verse 5 answers it. The Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. That's part of the song. He has broken the staff. It says he answers the parable. The Lord God, the Son, Jesus Christ, has defeated the wicked rulers of the Gentile world powers. He has broken their staff that only comes at his second coming. So what Isaiah is seeing here is not just Babylon being taken by Media-Persia. He's looking at the next mountaintop, way out there, where Jesus comes. They repented as a nation, and he sets up their kingdom. Now you can rest. Because there's been no rest for Israel. Not since Babylon. Israel's not at rest now. You look at what's happened in Israel tonight. And you look how it was reported. And how the Palestinians had said, oh, they're murdering us, they're murdering us. And then they found out, no, that's not what's happening at all. So the wrong news reports were going out, and people here in this country were reporting what they were hearing from them. Now they've had to back up and say, whoa, wait a minute. They were lying to us. Well, wakey, they would lie to you? I mean, think about it. And here, what did he say? September 28th. He said, all deals are off. Who? The PLO leader. The leader of the Palestinians. The Abbas. Who really? The Hamas. Do you realize that Hamas is on both sides of Israel? Hamas is on the western side, and Hamas is on the eastern side. Israel is surrounded by the enemy. And now Russia and Iran are giving them all weapons. They're closing in. But what was the video they sent out? How to kill with a knife. And the video, they're calling it a intifada, but a knife intifada. And they're giving out all these big knives. And they showed them the videos and showed them exactly where to cut the Jews. And they sent them out in the streets. And they were killing women and children. But see, then they were telling the lies, because when the guns were turned on them and they were shot, they shot them down in blood, in cold blood. And then it was reported over here now today, they said, oh no, wait a minute, that's wrong. That's not the way it happened. See, today we're living in a day of films. Everybody's got a little phone that takes pictures. The videos are made. The videos are made. So, look at what's happening in Israel.
But God's on their side.
God is on their side, and he promises them here in Isaiah 14, your day is coming. Your day is coming. But he tells them, you're going to have to go through an awful lot before. An awful lot. That second Holocaust is coming. But he says here when they sing out, oh, how could this possibly be? And he said, because God has defeated them. Jesus Christ has defeated them. He's broken their staff. And the only time that he does that is at the Battle of Armageddon, when they all join together and he breaks their staff. The Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke. He that ruled the nations in anger is persecuted, and none hindereth. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. When can that be? That can only be during the kingdom, after Jesus comes back. No other time has this taken place. He says, yea, the fir trees rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since thou art laid down, no feller has come up against us. Because remember, each time that a warring tribe would go through Israel, they cut down the trees. That's why they're always planting all these trees in Israel. Because the enemy would always cut down the trees. But here's another reason. Every time Israel was off her land, the land became barren. It would turn back to a dust bowl. And then when Israel would return, it would blossom. And when it would blossom, the enemy would say, hey, that's our land. And then when they would defeat Israel, the land would go back to being barren. Why? God would withhold the rain. And it says that the enemies were in astonishment. How did this happen? God did it. Over and over and over again. You kind of wonder after a while, how many times does he have to do it before you get the picture? Yeah. Look in the box. It says, verse 6 through 8, tyrants and empires defeated at last. Even the curse on the earth is lifted. Because the trees are singing. The Bible tells us, because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. That's really something to think about, but if you go all the way back to Genesis, you see the curse was put on all of creation. That's where the weeds came from, the thorns and the thistles and all that. But he said that's all going to be removed. All of it's going to be removed. Isaiah 55:12 says, for ye shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills shall break forth before you into singing, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Wow. He said, bad news and then good news. Bad news and then good news. Look at the next page. 14:9. Hell from beneath is moved. Now look, what did he do? He turns it again. He gives them all this good stuff. All this wonderful stuff. And then he said, by the way, let's go back and talk about hell. He said, hell from beneath, that's the only place where there will be no happiness. He said, hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. Who is he talking to? He's talking to the enemies of God. He's talking to the enemies of Israel. He's talking to Satan himself. It stirreth up the dead for thee. Even all the chief ones of the earth, it hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. You think about it. He said, they're waiting for you, Satan. All the tyrants, the kings, the emperors, the presidents, the popes, the world leaders that now wait. Satan himself. You think about it. They're down there in hell. They're waiting. They're waiting. They're waiting for their leaders and the power behind their greed and their evilness. I imagine in hell today, they waited for their captors to join them in their torments. I was thinking about this again today as I was going over my notes again. I can't hardly stand to watch things about the Holocaust. It just really, that's one of the things that I have a hard time watching. I know it's reality. When you see all them bodies piled up and all those little shoes, you know, where they burned all those children alive, and you see all them starved to death bones and bodies of those people, and you think about them, you think about how they were tormented and skinned and their teeth was pulled, and they just did horrible things to them in the name of medical, you know. You think about those captains and those generals and those soldiers who did all those cruel, horrible things. And even when they were tried, they said, we were just following orders. You think about them down there in hell. Don't you think they rejoiced a little bit when Hitler joined them? The hatred and the anger poured out upon these leaders. And it's your fault I'm here. When they stand before the white throne, they'll find out why they're there.
Right.
They're there because they rejected Jesus Christ. Because the only reason anybody goes to hell is because they reject Jesus Christ. Even those people could have been saved. Even those people. He said hell from beneath is moved. What is he? He's been talking about these world leaders. And he said hell is moved. He said they're raised up from their thrones, all the kings of the nations. All they speak and say unto thee, art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? It's kind of like, no. You're just like us, you know? You're weak like us. You thought you were all that, but you're not. He said, you become like unto us. Thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the noise of the vials, the worm is spread unto thee, and the worms cover thee. He said, boy, when you were sitting on your throne, you didn't think this could possibly happen, did you? I mean, he's really coming on them, isn't he? He said, you're going to be covered with worms. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? Now he gets to the core, where it came from, that pompous, that pride. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? Son of the morning, how art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? They remember them. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend unto heaven. But do you remember Nimrod saying, let us build our own tower. Let us make a name for ourselves. The lie that was Satan. And here it is. Here's Lucifer. He said, for thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend unto heaven. That meant he had to be on earth to ascend into heaven. He had a position of high authority here upon the earth, just like God gave this nation to this, and this. He divided it all up. At first, Lucifer had a high position of authority here upon the earth that God had created perfect. Did you ever wonder how long that went on before the fall?
Yeah.
Did you ever wonder how long the earth laid in that condition, covered with water and ice? We have no idea how old the earth is. We don't even really have any idea what all was going on there on the earth when Satan was here upon the earth, Lucifer.
Right.
And he led 130 angels with him. They had a position here upon the earth. I mean, there was no men. Adam was the first man.
Right.
Okay? But imagine, here were these angels here upon the earth. And he said, come on, let's go to heaven, just take over. What power he had. The Bible said he was the most beautiful and the wisest. He summed it all up, beauty and wisdom. And God said he was perfect. Because God doesn't create junk. Everything he creates is perfect. How art thou fallen from heaven? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, go up. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. See, so he was beneath the stars. I will sit also upon the mount of congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend upon and above the heights of the clouds. See, he was beneath the clouds. I will be like the Most High. He even tells us where heaven is. It's in the north, that north star that directs people home when they're lost. Heaven is in the north. But look what he says. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. He just got done telling all the wicked leaders of the world that's what's going to happen to you. And then he says, now, we'll get to the root of the problem. The one who started it all. He said, now he's going to be brought down. He's going to be turned to ashes in front of the people who followed him. He's going to be cast into the lake of fire, that eternal hell. But listen. The Bible says that the fire will come from inside him and burn him into ashes right in front of him. Right in front of him. Then he'll drop down into the hell, into the center of the earth, but then there'll come when he will be taken and cast into that lake of fire. He's the third person that goes into the lake of fire. Who's the first two?
False prophet.
False prophet
Antichrist.
and the Antichrist, cast alive. And he said, they're still there burning. Still burning. He said, yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble? That did shake the kingdoms? Because see, when he addresses him earlier in the chapter, he's addressing a king, but he's addressing the power behind that king. And we need to remember that there is an evil power behind these world rulers. And even people who may torment you. That's a spiritual battle too, because there is an evil presence behind them, pushing them to torment you. Let's not blame it all on Satan. Sometimes people are just not nice. You know, like I wasn't today when I just walked into the room and shut the door. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the one that shook the earth, that made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the house of the prisoners? I said, wow, is this him? Well, he don't look like much now. He don't look like much now. The lake of fire. The lake of fire. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And I will add this, guess what? We'll see that happen. Yeah, we'll be there for that. Because we'll be in our city when he attacks it. We'll see the fire come down from heaven and devour him right where he stands. Isaiah 14:24. Say it again, then we're going to close. The Lord of hosts hath sworn, saying, surely as I have thought, so shall it come to pass. I mean, we shouldn't even wonder about what's going to happen next. I mean, God's got it under control. He already knows who's going to be in the White House and if there's going to be a White House. He's already designed and decided who's going to sit on the throne there. It's all in his hands. Yes, we're required to pray, and we're required to be accountable and to do what we can and to tell the truth, to stand on the truth and not to compromise. But here's the fact. God's already got it decided. And it's going down, down, down. And no matter who he puts in there, and I know this is not a good thing to hear, do you know what? There's no turning back. We've already done all the sins that Israel did. And even though Israel came back to the Lord a few times, she still had to suffer for what she did. And America's going to have to suffer what America has allowed. It's going to happen. It says, the Lord of hosts hath sworn, saying, surely as I have thought, so shall it come to pass. And as I have purposed, so shall it stand. This is the purpose that is purposed upon, not Babylon, not Media-Persia, not Greece, not Rome, not the United States, the whole earth. And this is the hand that is stretched out. And I love the next verse where it says, for the Lord of hosts has purpose, and who shall disannul it? And his hand is stretched out, and who shall turn it back? And when he talks about his hand being stretched out here, that's not his hand of mercy. Because as you study the book of Isaiah, that's his hand of wrath. That's his hand of punishment. And several times he says in the book of Isaiah, I've stretched that hand out and nobody can turn it back. That's why I say, America has been cursed. And I hate to say that, because if anybody loves this country, I do. But we have committed those sins. We have rejected God. We've taken him out of the public square. We've taken him out of the schools. We're tearing down the crosses. We're telling kids they can't wear anything Christian to school. They can't wear anything of national pride to school. We're being told that this is not a Christian nation. I heard the president say 3 times that this was a Muslim nation. Yeah. He said, we're no longer a Christian nation. He said, we're a Muslim nation. We're probably one of the greatest Muslim nations in the world. And people say, oh, well, he was just saying that the Muslims have more freedom here than anywhere else, was he? Well, is that what he's saying? Makes you want to go,
Yeah.
See, it's not hidden, people. But see, when you start saying, look, this is in plain sight, this is Satan's strategies, this is exactly what's happening, people start saying, boy, she's gone off the deep end. She's one of them people, you know. Or he's one of them people, you know. That conspiracy theory people. Listen, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's truth. It's in God's Word. And it's right in plain sight. When you tell people, there it is, they say, I don't want to see that. There's no way. You know why? Pride. That couldn't happen in our country. Or fear. Fear, right? And a lot of it is ignorance.
Plug in mirrors.
It's ignorance. Not only is it ignorance from people not teaching it, it's ignorance of people not receiving it when it's taught. Let's close in prayer. We do